Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?
Yes.
Brian Kohberger wants to take back that guilty plea and go to trial. I'm laying out the evidence of planning by Kohberger that prosecutors say would have been the nail in his coffin. Let's get into it. Brian Kohberger, he has a lot of time on his hands. In fact, he has nothing but time to sit and think inside his prison cell. He's now 31 years old, and at this point, barring some major wins for him in court, that's where he'll be sitting for the rest of his life.
Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty? Yes. That single word, spoken by Brian Kohberger in July of 2025, closed the book on one of the most haunting criminal cases in recent memory. 4 students murdered in a house on King Road. A DNA-linked knife sheath. A doctoral candidate in criminology who had studied the very investigative techniques closing in around him. The plea was supposed to be the end. It was not. It was a door closing on one chapter and another one swinging violently open. Because now, from inside a maximum security cell in Kuna, Idaho, Kohberger has filed a petition for post-conviction relief, and in that petition, he is attempting to torch the entire foundation of his own guilty plea, reducing the finality of that courtroom, yes, to ash. It's the legal equivalent of a man setting fire to his own lifeboat while still adrift at sea. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Trial Theory, Unsealed. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence.
Recovered. Recently, Judge Hippler unsealed a document that outlined the timeline of Brian Kohberger's purchases. This came before Kohberger filed a petition for post-conviction relief earlier this week, saying he was coerced by his defense attorneys to plead guilty and made promises that were never kept. He claims he's actually innocent. Kohberger filed that petition just days before a documentary on Netflix was set to drop, and that series is now airing. Kohberger remains behind bars in Idaho's maximum security institution in Kuna. He spends his days in a cell alone, by himself, and he's now asserting his innocence.
The filing, a petition for post-conviction relief, lands on the court docket not as a simple motion, but as a hand grenade rolled into an already silent room. Kohberger claims he was coerced. He alleges his defense attorneys made promises that were never kept. But the 3 words that shatter the veneer of settled justice are simply these. I'm actually innocent. Not a procedural error, not ineffective assistance of counsel as a vague legal standard, actual innocence. The statement is absolute. It is binary. It attempts to rewind the clock past the plea, past the DNA on the cat bar sheath, past the digital ghost of his own Amazon click activity meticulously laid out by federal experts, and back to a moment where the question of guilt was still an open one. This is a broken plea. The architecture of the state's case, which never saw the full light of a public trial, is the true battleground now. And the newly unsealed records from Judge Hippler reveal the terrifying precision of the prosecution's financial and digital timeline. An FBI forensic accountant was prepared to walk a jury through an exhibit list that reads like a blueprint for premeditation.
Prosecutors say Kohberger made during the murders, the timeline that led up to the horrific murders on November 13th, 2022. Now, this court filing, unsealed by Judge Hippler, reveals an expert was going to testify about Brian Kohberger's spending, what he was buying, and how he was making purchases before and after the murders. Some of this information is disturbing, and some of it's just downright confusing. A major piece of evidence prosecutors would have focused on: the K-bar knife, a sheath, and a sharpener purchased off Amazon. Investigators found the sheath next to Maddie Mogan's body, but they never recovered the sharpener or the knife. Prosecutors certainly believe a K-bar knife was the murder weapon because of the sheath left at the scene. We knew that Brian Kohberger bought a K-bar knife, sheath, and sharpener in March of 2022, 8 months before the murders. And now we're seeing...
On March 20, 2022, 7.5 months before the killings, a $130 electronic gift card is purchased on Kohberger's Amazon account, linked to his Visa card, billed to his family home in Pennsylvania. The very next day, that gift card purchases a Kai bar full-size Marine Corps fighting knife, and a sharpener, and vegan DHA supplements. It is a mundane shopping cart that holds the architecture of
Cox
death.
was going to testify that the customer purchased an electronic gift card for $130 using the Brian C. Kohberger account. The billing information was for Brian Kohberger at his family's home in Pennsylvania, and a Visa card for Kohberger was used to purchase the gift card. This was on March 22nd, 2022, 7.5 months before the murders. The plan, prosecutors would have argued, was already in motion. And the next day, the purchase for the knife was made. Cox was going to testify that on March 21st, 2022, the electronic gift card was used to purchase a K-bar sharpener for $23.40 through the Brian C. Kohberger account. At the same time, the customer purchased a K-bar full-size Marine Corps fighting knife for $86.15. Also purchased with the gift card, omega-3 vegan DHA supplements for $20.45 using that electronic gift card. The expert was also going to testify that click activity on Kohberger's account was going to show that Kohberger was viewing pages related to K-bar style knives on the same day the gift card was purchased and the knife was purchased.
Then, for 5 consecutive days, from March 22 to March 27, the Amazon click activity shows the account holder obsessively refreshing the shipping progress. Day after day after day. A man waiting for his weapon to arrive.
And the knife was purchased. Then, in the days after Kohberger ordered the K-bar knife, sheath, and sharpener, he was checking on the shipping progress. The prosecutors said between March 22nd and March 27th, 2022, Amazon.com click activity for the Brian C. Kohberger account shows each day that the customer was viewing pages associated with the shipping progress of the Amazon.com order for the K-bar knife and sharpener purchased on March 21st, 2022. Now, this raises a question. Was Brian Kohberger planning to carry out murders in Pennsylvania, or was he thinking ahead to his move to Washington State? We don't know. Nearly 8 months after buying the K-bar.
The timeline from the court filing accelerates like a dark drum beat. August 2022, a new bank account is opened with a $2,000 deposit. Cash he never touches until the days immediately surrounding the homicides. November 10, 2022, 3 days before the murders, he switches to cash-only purchases.
And Kohberger, back in August of 2022, opened a new bank account, depositing $2,000. Prosecutors say he only started withdrawing cash from that account on the morning of the murders and only used cash to make purchases starting on November 10th, 2022, 3 days before the homicides. Okay, so there's a lot more to dig into than what I've just read to you and talked to you about. So let's bring in Joe Giacalone. He is a retired cold case sergeant with the NYPD, also the host of the great show on YouTube, True Crime with the Sarge. Joe, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Anjanette.
So, Joe, your first reaction to looking at these expert
The digital footprint goes silent in one register and screams in another. November 13, 2022, in the early morning hours, 4 students are stabbed to death. A K-bar sheath lies next to one of the victims. November 15, 2022, just 2 days after the murders, Amazon click activity shows the user navigating to a page on how to delete account activity. Prosecutors would have called this consciousness of
Nearly
guilt.
8 months after buying the K-bar knife on November 13th, 2022, in the early morning hours, Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana were stabbed to death in the home on King Road. The K-bar knife sheath found next to Maddie's leg. 2 days later, it appears Brian Kohberger was working to potentially cover his tracks had he realized he left the K-bar sheath behind. Prosecutors wrote that Shane Cox would testify that 2 days after the murders on November 15th, 2022, Amazon.com click activity showed the customer navigated to a page related to deletion of account activity. So 2 days after the murders, prosecutors were going to present testimony that Kohberger tried to delete his Amazon account, but he didn't. Prosecutors wrote, on November 23rd, 2022, and December 6th, 2022, the Amazon click activity for the Brian Kohberger account shows the customer was viewing pages associated with K-bar style knives with sheaths from this Amazon account. Prosecutors had mentioned in court documents previously that the November 23rd and December 6th searches for a K-bar sheath made them wonder whether Kohberger was looking for a replacement knife and sheath in case the cops came knocking on his door, or was he looking for a replacement to kill again?
And then, something stranger. On November 23 and again on December 6, weeks after he had left his own DNA-laden sheath at a crime scene, the account is browsing for replacement K-bar knives with sheaths. Which raises the only question that truly matters in the silence of that prison cell. Was he covering a mistake, or was he restocking? Was this evidence of panic, or the logistics of a predator preparing to strike again?
Let's go back to the purchase. The purchase was made in March of 2022 of the K-bar knife, sheath, and sharpener. The sharpener part just freaks me out. And then it's made on, he buys a gift card, first of all, to buy this stuff. I'm assuming he thinks that's going to hide it. I don't know how he would think that. I don't understand the gift card part of this because everything, there's a record of it all. So he buys the gift card. The next day, he buys all of these items. And then he's clicking, they say, every day, searching to see when the progress. Does this raise concerns to you that maybe he was thinking about doing this before he moved to Washington, like possibly targeting somebody in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, he was getting
This is what a
antsy.
broken plea buries. The defense, for their part, fought furiously to keep the Amazon evidence out, arguing the account was a shared family household account, polluted by machine learning and multiple devices. That argument now lives in the post-conviction filing subtext, a ghost limb of a defense that was never
Seeing
mounted.
what a rep from Amazon was going to testify to at Kohberger's trial. First, Kohberger's Amazon account was owned by him. Shane Cox was going to testify that Kohberger set up his Amazon account in October 2017, and his email was attached to it. Now, a lot of people have Amazon accounts. That's not a big deal. But Kohberger's lawyers were fighting tooth and nail to get this evidence from coming in at trial. They argued the account was shared by the family, and showing what someone clicked on could be misleading. They fought and fought against this testimony coming in at trial.
Because in terms of machine learning, one component is that when there's a household account where there's multiple users with multiple cell phones and multiple laptops going into purchases, there's machine learning and cross references there. In terms of the way that Amazon works as a company globally and artificial intelligence, they're doing all kinds of things to understand what consumers and purchasers and sellers are trying to do to actually prompt people to buy certain things. So in this instance, with regard to these purchases, we have very limited data regarding Mr. Kohberger's purchases without the metadata and the context. And that's the reason that we are seeking.
But the record is sealed and unsealed now. The digital clicks remain, the sheath remains. The white Hyundai Elantra captured on ATM cameras as he withdrew from that 2,000 cash reserve remains. Kohberger's petition will need to explain away not just a coerced plea, but a digital and physical constellation of evidence that requires an almost impossible alternative explanation. It is an attempt to unring a bell that was cast in silicon and
that's
steel.
what I don't understand. I don't understand why he thought withdrawing cash. That's one of the huge questions in this case. Why did he think not using his debit or credit cards in the days leading up to the homicides and then after only using cash? How on earth does that help you when you're still having to withdraw the money out of the ATM? You're still being captured on camera. You're still having a record of those transactions. What do you make of that?
Just another mistake added onto his list of mistakes that he's made, where he thought he was going to be smarter than the investigators because he knew all this background information about criminal justice and policing and crime scenes and all the other things that go along with it. And I think the arrogance is what kind of trips him up at this point.
Go read the petition for post-conviction relief filed in Ada County. Read the Amazon click activity summaries unsealed by Judge Hippler. Then ask yourself the question this filing forces. If the plea was truly broken, what exactly was the promise that shattered?
Yeah, it's actually pretty amazing. And I think this is where the prosecution kind of dropped the ball. They dropped the ball in a couple places, but this one, I think, not trying to narrow down a motive, the reason why this happened. Generally, when you have a big case like this, where you have, unfortunately, 4 homicides, the law enforcement hasn't learned anything from this offender. They haven't learned anything about what he did and how he chose his victims. And this is something even now we're seeing with Rex Sherman in the Long Island serial killer case, right? The FBI is stepping in. They want to know how he did this and why he did this, and he was using their book, so to speak, as a textbook. You know, we have similar situation here. We have a criminal justice student, PhD student. We have all the different things that he's learned. But how does he come across these victims will remain, unfortunately, a mystery
If you
forever.
believe this channel's mission of following the evidence past the headlines, like this video, subscribe to Trial Theory Unsealed, and turn on notifications. We'll be here when the next document drops.